This is the CBS Evening News with Bob Schieffer.
Good evening. Mount St. Helens blew steam 18,000 feet into the air today, but otherwise some fairly good news there. The volcano presented few signs that it would repeat its spectacular performance of Thursday night. Bernard Goldberg reports.
Most of Mount St. Helens was hiding under a cover of clouds today, spewing some ash, but basically quiet, which is absolutely no indication that it will remain quiet.
We're still in this explosive mode, and there's no indication that we're going to get out of it right away.
When the volcano blew Thursday night, it sent a blizzard of ash over Portland, Oregon, 45 miles southwest of the mountain. But crews were out almost immediately washing it away, preparing for Portland's major social event of the year, today's Rose Festival Parade. But in spite of today's hoopla, there are some grim faces in Portland. St. Helens apparently is frightening tourists away. Booking at some hotels are set to be down 50%.
Some of the people who had made reservations had called and canceled or were hesitant to come up because of the unknowns that are involved with the ash fallout.
Harry Truman was the old man of the mountain. He refused to leave his cabin on the side of Mount St. Helens when it began erupting in March.
Spirit Lake and Mount St. Helens is my life, folks. I've lived there 50 years. It's a part of me. That mountain and that lake is a part of Truman, and I'm a part of it.
Today, his friends and relatives held a memorial service for Harry Truman, whose cabin was covered last month by more than 100 feet of ash and rock. He was 84.
Let there be no regrets for Harry Truman. He died just like he lived, with a flourish. He wanted no remorse from us.
And there is another memorial for Harry Truman, a commercial memorial getting a lot of play in the Pacific Northwest.
If I leave my home, I die in a week. This mountain's where I buried my wife. I've got
Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, Longview, Washington.
I'm staying here the rest of my life.
And enjoy yourself.
Newsweek magazine poll out tonight shows President Carter and Ronald Reagan now in a virtual dead heat in voter preference. The nationwide sample of 1,080 adults shows Reagan now favored by 45%, the president by 43% in a two-way race. And in a three-way race with independent John Anderson, the president fares even worse, with Reagan favored by 40%, the president 36%, and Anderson by 19%. In Washington, Senator Kennedy told the Liberal Americans for Democratic Action convention today that he still has no intention of letting the president have the Democratic nomination without a fight. But as we hear from Jed Duvall now, Kennedy does seem to be changing his tack.
Offering our podium.
Suddenly, the senator is a bit less combative. For months, the problems of the country were President Carter's policies. Now, as before the ADA today, the wording is changed, the attack muted.
The problem today is not the fact of government, but the failure of government.
The men and women of the ADA applauded and then voted on whether the organization should endorse the senator's candidacy.
All those in favor of the adoption of this resolution, vote aye.
Not a nay was heard. What is the strategy of this candidacy in the 8 weeks until the party convention? Hope, mostly. There are decisions being made about what speeches to deliver, how to word them. There are 24 or so workers scouting the countryside for disenchanted Carter delegates. There are Kennedy aides at work on convention rules, trying to keep the Carter-Mondale folks from completely controlling convention week. When the Democratic National Committee told the television networks that credentials, rules, and platform matters will be conducted during the day and not in the evening in prime time, a Kennedy spokesman called it manipulation and said, "It shows us that they're worried." Party Chairman John White denied manipulating, said the TV schedule is in the first draft. Whether the Carter campaign is worried or not, the Kennedy side is left with a strategy of hanging on and waiting for some grievous political error on the part of the president. Hanging on and hoping for a sudden and as yet undetected groundswell for the senator. For the Kennedy people, that means simply being there, handy, if something like that happens. It amounts to a campaign strategy of keeping your fingers crossed. Jed Duvall, CBS News at Kennedy headquarters in Washington.
The Republicans didn't have their fingers crossed in Los Angeles. They were wearing their palms out, applauding each other as they launched their unity campaign. And we have more on that now from Jerry Bowen.
It seemed that only Harold Stassen was missing from the parade of defeated Republican presidential candidates last night, a lineup that ranged from George Big Mo Bush to Ben-Hur Fernandez. The headliner, of course, was nominee apparent Ronald Reagan, and the emphasis was on unity and money. The $500 a plate extravaganza was taped to be broadcast nationwide next week as part of a party fundraising campaign. The more than $500,000 raised by the dinner alone will underwrite the cost of the TV Unity show. A show of unity that seemed in jeopardy only hours earlier because of a potential party split over the future of this man, National Party Chairman Bill Brock. For weeks, Reagan partisans have been calling for Brock's ouster, demanding a Reagan loyalist be put in his place. Moderate Republicans warned Reagan the move could have disastrous impact on the party and his presidential bid. The moderates won, but Reagan installed his own man as Brock's chief deputy and denied there had been any squabble.
I think that Washington is a town in which rumors thrive like spores of a fungus.
But amid the celebrity glitter of last night's Republican bash, the rumors continued to thrive. Speculation, really, that Reagan let the moderates win this round, figuring they won't have the strength to go to the mat again on the more important issue of his running mate. And last night, there seemed to be running mates everywhere.
I had hoped, frankly, to stand on this platform in another capacity.
I had the dickens beaten out of me by a very honorable, honest, decent man. And that's what happened, and
Governor, what we were trying to tell you is that really all the time we were all really for you, secretly.
And there were loyalty pledges from a Fernandez.
I want you to think of Ronald Reagan and the American Eagle. They are inseparable. They are one and the same. Strong, tough, free, and proud.
And from a Ford, the former president calling from his Palm Springs home where he is convalescing from recent knee surgery.
You can count me in as a part of the team.
Reagan suggested that this night of Friday the 13th would be remembered as unlucky for the Democrats.
We really do mean unity. We really do have unity.
And with the appearance of the party's 1980 standard bearer, the evening ended on cue. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, with the Reagan campaign in Beverly Hills.
Jordan's King Hussein is due to arrive in Washington Monday for a two-day state visit. Today, the White House released the transcript of a talk that President Carter held yesterday with Jewish editors, and a good part of it was devoted to that coming state visit. Robert Pierpoint reports.
The president gave the Jewish editors a preview of his meetings with Jordan's King Hussein, saying he'll try to get Hussein to join the Israeli-Egyptian talks on the future of the Palestinians as soon as possible. I'll use all the persuasive powers that I have, Mr. Carter said, to encourage him to be constructive in bringing about a comprehensive peace in the Middle East. The president pointed out that the original Camp David Accords called for the King of Jordan to join Israel and Egypt in negotiating self-government for the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and then in a second phase to negotiate a permanent status for those areas. But Hussein refused on the basis that he was not adequately consulted before the terms of the Camp David Accords were reached. Meantime, talks between Egypt and Israel have bogged down over the first phase, self-government for the Palestinians. This week, the European Common Market countries called for the Palestine Liberation Organization to be included in those talks. But President Carter told the Jewish editors that he would not agree to this until the PLO recognizes Israel's right to exist. Mr. Carter did suggest that he would like to see West Bank and Gaza mayors and other Palestinians participate in the talks, which they have so far refused to do without the PLO. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News, at the White House.
The Ayatollah Khomeini reportedly has announced a cultural revolution for Iran. According to Tehran radio, Khomeini said such a step is needed to wipe out all traces of life under the deposed Shah. Among other things, the plan would include placing all schools and universities under control of Muslim clergymen. In Stockholm, Iranian Foreign Minister Ghosbazadeh said he is convinced the American hostage problem will be solved as soon as possible in a peaceful and honorable way. Today is the 224th day of captivity for the 53 Americans. American Telephone and Telegraph said today that it will appeal the $1.8 billion fine levied by a Chicago judge yesterday. An AT&T lawyer called the fine obscene. The winner for now in the huge antitrust battle is a communications firm which claimed that AT&T tried to squeeze it out of business. We have more on the 6-year-long legal battle from Bob Fall in Chicago.
It was David versus Goliath. Tiny MCI Communications Corporation, which provides long-distance telephone service via microwave, against the largest corporation in the world, AT&T, which nets more in 1 week than the newcomer nets in 1 year. MCI, which charges up to 50% less than Bell, argued that AT&T tried to put it out of business by refusing to provide equipment needed for long-distance transmission. A key exhibit, AT&T's own notes of a 1972 Florida meeting by company executives in which one said, "Let's choke them off before they get started."
They went out of their way with deliberate actions to stop us from existence.
MCI board chairman William McGowan.
They said that we will make MCI an example, that if someone tries to compete with us, we will, on purpose, deliberately, on the record, we will step on them.
Reach out and touch someone.
What the jury decided was that AT&T not only reached out and touched MCI, but that it deliberately and unfairly monopolized its long-distance telephone lines. AT&T's defense, that it didn't have approval from government regulators to give MCI what it wanted.
We bent over backwards to try to accommodate MCI in every way we could.
AT&T's lawyer says the case was so complex the jury didn't understand it.
They just happened to be misled by the fact that certain things had gone on in the regulatory process which they didn't understand and which seemed to them to amount to violations of law, I believe, mostly because they didn't understand it.
A verdict like this, says AT&T, could wreck our system, cost us customers, and drive up rates. To the contrary, says MCI, it will encourage other companies to offer more service and rates will fall. Appeals could take several years. AT&T's attorney says the dollar amount is so exaggerated and that the verdict is so unsupported by facts that the judgment will be overturned. But the little guy, which took on the big kid on the block, says it isn't worried, pointing out that 5 times in the last 5 years it has taken AT&T all the way to the Supreme Court and that each time it has won. Bob Fall, CBS News, Chicago.
The San Francisco jury today began deliberations in a long, complex trial involving 18 members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. They're accused of crimes ranging from drug sales to murder. 2,000 to 3,000 motorcyclists roared into the small Kansas town of Quanimo near Topeka yesterday for an annual beer drinking celebration. When it was over, 4 people were dead. County officials said about 99% of the participants were drunk. A line of police tried to get the bikers out of town, but not before the situation got out of hand. One resident said at the Friday the 13th event, "Usually there's no trouble. I don't know what caused this." A bit earlier, we were talking about the impact that John Anderson's independent campaign for president is having on the frontrunners. Well, our next report is about a woman who, according to some at least, has had considerable impact on Anderson's campaign. The story by Bob McNamara.
To say that a man would run for the highest office in the land to please his wife or because she would like being First Lady, to me, is absolutely ridiculous.
Some of Kiki Anderson's friends and foes believe her ambitions run stronger than her husband's, that she is the reason he's in the race. 48 years old, the daughter of a Boston barber, Kiki Anderson is described as both bright and spunky and as vindictive, pushy, and loud, the most outspoken lady of Campaign 80.
I do get impatient with people, and I do not pay probably as much attention as I should to the diplomatic niceties, but to me that's just a waste of time. I have been speaking for 27 years. I'm to stop now because my husband is a candidate for president?
She's been through a dozen local and congressional campaigns with John Anderson, believes her greatest strength is encouragement and few doubt her influence.
I think, first of all, I'm going to make sure that I don't forget to do what I sometimes do, and that is to introduce the most important member of the Anderson for President campaign staff, and that's Kiki, my wife.
The Anderson campaign has as many veins of jealousy running through it as any other. And some advisors and others believe she has too much influence.
And as far as having his ear more than anyone else has, I have been with him for 27 years. I'm his wife. Who, other than his wife, would have his ear more than I would? Do you think that I'm the kind of woman that someone could tell me to stay home or to limit my influence? Absolutely not.
Both in and outside the Anderson campaign's Washington headquarters, there's an air of fear of the candidate's wife. Out of half a dozen people asked to be interviewed on camera about Mrs. Anderson, all declined, all afraid what they said about her might reflect badly on Anderson. Several who used to work here say she's the reason they're not around anymore.
Now, are you asking me if I personally was responsible for firing anybody on John Anderson's staff? And the answer to that would be no. But that is not to say in the future, if I saw someone at the campaign headquarters, you know, who was not acting in what I thought was the best interests of the campaign, I wouldn't express an opinion about it.
Anderson and his wife call the campaign an equal partnership, and when together she frets over his appearance and worries about his health. In public, she doesn't gaze at her husband as Nancy Reagan does, nor smile in the face of hostility as Rosalind Carter can do.
Now, I'm not a very good political wife because I haven't come with any campaign buttons except that one, unless...
And while campaign aides privately regard her as a liability, both they and she deny she's been given a minimal role and persuaded to work on her own.
Do you think you could hurt John Anderson's chances?
No. What have I said that's so horrendous? Just because I like to get to the point quickly. I don't see how that could in any way hurt John Anderson. And the one thing he said to me before we began this, he said, Kiki, please don't feel you have to be anything different than you've been to me for the last 27 years.
He didn't tell you to cool the talk?
Oh, no. He said I would lose my charm.
She has raised 5 children. Eleonora, the oldest of the 5. There are 4 daughters and a son. Kiki Anderson says her secret is she doesn't have a genius for ruling, but a genius for not being ruled. And if there's no White House in her future, there may be a job in the news business.
Now signing off to Channel 2, this is Barbara Walters saying...
And this is Bob McNamara, CBS News, signing off from Los Angeles.
Well, they dedicated Old Glory in Washington today on this Flag Day, but it wasn't just any Old Glory. It was the largest American flag ever made, requiring a crew of hundreds to unfurl. The flag covers 2 acres, is made of polyester, and each of its stars measures 13 feet from tip to tip. It is the brainchild of a former New York advertising executive who hopes to see it hang from the Verrazano Bridge in New York Harbor so it will face the Statue of Liberty. And brace yourself for this one, all you fans of Miss Piggy. It looks like the end is near for the Muppets, at least for the TV end of the Muppet activities. A Muppet official says when the current batch of 24 television episodes now being filmed is completed, that will be it for the Muppet TV show. From now on, Miss Piggy and Kermit will concentrate solely on movies.
Everywhere.
Most of us know rock and roll is here to stay, even if the music, like some rock and roll performers, suffers a setback now and then. But there's often a spotlight at the end of the rock and roll tunnel, and this time James Brown is in it as an actor in a new movie. Martha Teichner has the story.
It is still his favorite, the song that was James Brown's first hit, the first of more than 40 million-selling records.
I love this song. It does me wrong.
Please, don't leave me, he begged. And the fans didn't. They loved his strutting, his sweating, his frenzy, the way he gave them everything he had. In the 60s, he recorded one hit after another. Among the biggest, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. James Brown became more than a superstar. He became a leader. He implored black people to get an education. In 1968, after Dr. Martin Luther King was killed, He walked the streets of Washington and Boston and helped calm the rioting.
It's not important that I'm Mr. Brown. It's important that I earn the right to be called that, and that I can be called that, and I have a choice of turning it down. I'm still James.
Mr. Brown lives in a fancy house on an island. He wouldn't take us there. James came from the poorest part of Augusta, Georgia. He would take us there to see an old man he calls Mr. Dutt, who first taught him music.
I tried my loving out of many a girl.
He loved to dance, and he had all kind of different little steps, you know what I mean, doing the split and getting up and singing and one stuff, nothing like that. He had the spunk and everything. In other words, he wanted to shine.
And shine he did until he tried to give back to his people some of the success they gave to him. Just as James Brown won't show you his house, he won't show you the businesses he used to own in his heyday and then lost. Particularly the 3 radio stations he poured millions of dollars into, trying to put other blacks to work and educate them.
I lost a lot of money here trying to add some more light to my home. I hate that.
You feel bitter about that at all?
I feel disgusted.
He still has money to spend, a flashier lifestyle than most people, but trying to affect public policy didn't work for James Brown. He hoped the government would bail out his radio stations. Instead, the Internal Revenue Service went after him for $4.5 million, a claim he's still fighting. And when he endorsed Richard Nixon for president in 1972, thousands of his fans deserted him. 24 years after he recorded Please, 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 James Brown is still working. But he's had to survive in a music industry that used his ideas, copied his sound, and then moved on to the anonymity of disco. But now fans are turning back to rock and roll, back to James Brown. And at 47, James Brown's got a new bag, designed to put him back before the public in a big way. Acting. He plays a preacher in the new Blues Brothers movie.
It's about me, what I've been about all along, giving back, helping. Number 2, it's one of the greatest opportunities, but the greatest opportunity I've ever had.
We use him because he fit the role.
He's American classical music. You had your Beethovens, your Brahms, your Bach.
Right here, where I got my start in the business.
As he tries to shape who he will be, James Brown is still concerned with the matter of who he was long ago in Augusta, Georgia. Still begging, please, please, don't leave me.
I started yesterday, today I'm starting, and tomorrow I'll still be starting.
Martha Teichner, CBS News, Augusta, Georgia.
That's the news. I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS News, New York. Good night.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Bob Schieffer. Tomorrow's guest on Face the Nation will be Senator Richard G. Lugar of Indiana.